So I see the idea of team revenue as a unified multidisciplinary team comprised of sales, marketing, and other key stakeholders throughout the organization who work in alignment to drive long-term recurring stable revenue. So I'll say it again, a unified multidisciplinary team comprised of sales, marketing, and other key stakeholders throughout the organization who work in alignment to drive long-term recurring stable revenue. Okay. So that's a nice boilerplate sentence, but what does that even mean? What does that even look like? So you think about the difference between strategy and tactics, right? So we're still staying in strategy here. I just gave the strategy a slug there. That's all I did. So we're going to break this for now into a 5-point manifesto and kind of talk about what it means. If you're following with me logically, we're going to start with the most acute or practical aspects and work out to the most 30,000 foot sort of hypothetical, theoretical, philosophical. And that's the opposite of the way most people do things, right? But we're going to do it this way for a reason. See, so point one of the manifesto is aligning incentives across sales and marketing. So we're talking about rewarding everyone for being aligned and winning together. So right off the bat, this is going to trigger some people. Right off the bat, this is going to be controversial. There's a large number of people in business leadership that agree with this already, but they have no idea how to implement it. Where they would say, yeah, I agree with that. And then you say, well, what now? And there's a whole lot of differences between philosophical and practical agreement, right? So it's going to cost the organization something. It's going to cost my career something to admit that we've been doing it the wrong way. It's going to take a while to make the adjustment. There's a lot of reasons why this isn't easy to just put into practice, or really any change. Change is hard, but it's the only thing that stays the same. So the first point of the manifesto is aligning incentives across sales and marketing, rewarding everyone for being aligned and winning together. I think you could make an argument for aligning incentives across the entire company, potentially on profitability or some other way of looking at that. Point two, measuring and optimizing for those metrics that actually lead to the business outcomes that are strategic wins for the business. Measuring and optimizing for those metrics that actually lead to the business outcomes that are strategic wins for the business. I jumped into Demand Gen Live with Chris Walker and Refine Labs last night, and he articulated a really awesome answer to my question of describe the relationship between sales and marketing in the abstract, in the theory, right? Rather than trying to fix a broken sales and marketing situation, just describe it in its ideal form. And he articulated 4 of our 5 points. This is the one he left off, which I thought was interesting. I asked him about that, and he told me that, he was kind of considering that within some of the other points. I think it's worth articulating on its own, simply because it's how you iterate. And it requires focus on metrics, because the metrics themselves need to be reviewed. Are these the right metrics to be optimizing for and measuring? So that's the reason I like it to stand on its own. I think it makes sense for it to stand on its own. Janelle, thanks for joining us. Glad you're here. This is a very casual conversation, so we're super glad you're with us. Point one, aligning incentives across sales and marketing, potentially the company. Point two, measuring and optimizing for metrics that actually lead to business outcomes that are strategic wins for the business. Point three is building a demand engine. Building sort of a content and community-based demand engine that's going to bring value to prospects without strings attached before they're even ready to buy. And there's so many implications of this. This topic will be forever in sales and marketing from now on, I'm quite sure. As long as there's electricity in the internet, this will be a topic, right? And so thinking about what that looks like, it's very critical to understand how much sales overhead is wasted on people who aren't interested in buying. And I think one of the things that concerns me ethically, as somebody with a philosophy background, is why do we consider it a win when we convinced somebody to buy that didn't need to buy the product? Why is that even a win? And why are we okay with that as business leaders, much less celebrating it? And so ultimately, that's going to result in churn if you're in SaaS. If you're in other industries, it's going to result in other negative business outcomes, which is why closed sales is not necessarily an indicator of a healthy go-to-market strategy or a healthy company. Because you might have, the Wolf of Wall Street working for you, and he's beating his chest and closing people that have no need for the product. Congratulations. But where's that going to end for the business? It's not going to end in a positive brand promise that's then fulfilled, and then the ultimate long-term demand engine, which is, hey, you knew me before you knew you needed me, and you knew me that I provided this before you knew that you needed what I provide. So long-term, as privacy is becoming more of an issue, the internet is changing very, very quickly, and in good ways, in my opinion, for the most part, not completely, but for the most part. It's one of the societal dynamics that we as marketers need to deal with practically, but I think there's an ethical conversation here as well, right? And so I want that to be a part of the conversation, but ultimately, if you just want to take it down to return on investment within the business, how much bad sales tactics do you want to scale up based on a faulty strategy just to meet a certain revenue goal? And what is the long-term implication of that? Well, it's going to be churn in SaaS. It's a guarantee. It's going to be unhappy customers, damage to the brand. It's going to be negative long-term. If you just have that, go out in the field, beat somebody over their head, drag them home and eat them for dinner mentality, which, I have an experience carrying a sales quota. I have an experience having to hit OTE just to eat, right? So Janelle, great point. There's a high turnover for employees right now more than ever in the sales world, because everybody's starting to say, wait a minute, this doesn't feel right. Wait a minute, I'm not paying my bills. What about that big promise of that OTE? And, I keep going back to, two of my favorite statements from film, and they're from the same movie. And I'll give, somebody a digital high five, you can name it. Coffee is for closers and the leads are weak. Anybody know that movie? If you don't, you should go. If you guys are all marketing mostly, folks, you need to go Google those two quotes, and you'll understand your counterparts in sales immediately, and some of the pressure that they face and the stress that they face. So, there's a great scene with Alec Baldwin where the guy in the back of the room in his sales training goes to get coffee, and he's like, put that coffee down. Coffee is just for closers. You don't close, you don't drink coffee, right? And then the guy says, well, the leads you're giving me are weak, right? Classic. So we're trying to build something that's very different, where the people that are coming to the sales team are not only just actually needing the product, but they're aware of the credibility and the ability of that company to solve the problem that brought them to a buying intent anyway. I went a little longer on that one than I meant to, got a little pumped up there. So the fourth point is a unified buyer-centric revenue strategy. So when we start talking about how to grow revenue, we're talking about the long game here. We're talking about a way that is sustainable. We're talking about a way that brings value to everyone involved, including the employees, including the people that work at the company. When you get to go home or downstairs, as it were, in the new world, at the end of the day, and you feel like you've added value for the people that you talk to. And when you close a sale, but you actually solved a problem, when as a marketer, you get feedback from your sales team. Like, I've talked to 10 people today and they all knew who we were. They all knew why we do what we do. They all were actually thinking about purchasing and had the ability to purchase. They're the right people in the company, all this sort of stuff. If you think about that as a marketer, that's a great day when you get that kind of feedback, right? But that's never going to happen if we don't start with the question of who is our customer? What are their pain points? How do they think? How do they buy? Where are they? And how do we interact with them in an ethical way that they appreciate? And there's probably more points there. You guys can add to any of the things I'm saying once we kind of go to Q&A, but that's kind of where my head's at. It's got to be a unified buyer-centric revenue strategy that everybody understands, everybody's on board with, and everybody is benefited by. or you're going to continue with this turnover issue internally. You're going to continue with churn with your customers in SaaS. In building materials, it looks different. You bring on a distribution partner and then you don't take care of them because they're actually your customer, not the end customer. You don't take care of them, and then you end up with lawsuits, right? And you end up with major issues in your distribution channel. And all of this, these first 4 points we've been zooming out increasingly, right? If you will, land at cultivating a shared team mission, vision, values, and culture that is really bought into by everybody who works for the company. And it has to come from the top. I don't think we have any CEOs here. Anybody a CEO out of the small number of us? So, if there's one thing that I've learned, it's that you can say all the right things as a leader, as a C-suite leader, CEO, whoever. But when you go to actually put things into practice, it's often very different than what we said we believed and what the promise was when we brought you on board, right? Hey, we're a family. There's people now who say, if you see that in the job description, run, right? And I get why, because ultimately, no, my family has the same last name as me or as my wife's, okay, whatever. So there is a sense in which we can have family-like characteristics in our loyalty to a shared mission, vision, and culture, and the values that we work on together. Some of that can be very family-like, but it starts with the leaders at the top. It starts with every echelon of leadership, not just saying the right things on the PowerPoint, but when you get in a one-on-one and somebody's struggling, are those values represented in that conversation on the part of the leader? When there's a business problem to solve and you have to choose between a longer term answer that's not going to generate more quarterly revenue before the next report goes out in order to maintain the values of the company, everyone's watching to see what those decisions actually are. And if it's not consistent with what the stated mission, vision, culture, values are supposed to be, then all the people who were bought into that are suddenly pulling out. It's one of the main reasons you see such turnover and the Great Resignation happening and all of this is everybody agrees in the theory of point number 5. I can't think of a single leader that would go, no, we don't need to be on the same page about anything. Everybody should just do their own thing and then we'll figure it out later. Nobody says that. But the decisions and the leadership, practically speaking, are often very inconsistent with that idea, right? So I talked for a longer time than I wanted to. I want to intro Mason. Mason Cosby, it's a good friend, and in that LinkedIn best sense of a good friend. And I'm really grateful for his willingness to think through a lot of things with me. Mason, tell us just in brief your professional journey. You kind of had a sales to marketing transition, right?
Yes, super long story short, carrying a quota and essentially only eating what you kill was the start to my career. I worked, interestingly enough, for a parenting magazine. So you can imagine selling print ads where you only get paid on a 15% commission meant that I was pretty skinny at one point in my life. And there was no marketing support. And as a result, I just pounded the phones and did everything as an account executive that I now realize was not just sales, it was actually customer success. So essentially, if the customer was touched, I was the one that was engaging, whether it be, again, marketing, sales, customer management, billing, and even offboarding, and did that for, the just start of my career, and ended up, as a result of COVID, getting laid off. The entire company got laid off, and really just was looking for a job. And I think, like a lot of people in marketing, they found themselves in a marketing role and they just really fell in love with it. So for the past really few years, I've been in marketing, started in a rapidly growing SaaS tech company, and then transitioned to where I am now the marketing director at a marketing agency. So yes, I market marketers, which is very fun and interesting in and of itself. So I'm really, for lack of a better word, living and breathing in the marketing world all the time, because my customers are marketers. So in order to actually do effective marketing, I have to do killer marketing. So especially when it comes to team revenue, like I'm really passionate about this because I was a salesperson that had zero marketing support. And, Rob and I talked about this, but I mean, I did have 2 paychecks in my time that were $97 for 2 weeks of work. And luckily I'm good at budgeting and I could make it work. But I mean, when you're working 80 hours and you get paid $97, like that really freaking sucks. So that's why I'm really passionate about this concept and ensuring that sales and marketing are aligned, because I'm going to take it more from the vision perspective. So Rob, if you want to go ahead and dive right in, we can.
Yeah, I want to invite Mason to kind of interact with the 5 points and just, kind of.
Yeah. So I'm going to take it from the opposite direction, and I'm going to go pretty quick because I want to hear some of your thoughts. But essentially, when you have everyone aligned around a specific vision and a purpose, and I really see that points 4 and 5, which are buyer centric and vision, should go directly hand in hand. The vision and the mission of an organization should be to help the buyer. I've worked in organizations where it really wasn't. I've worked in organizations where when I asked the CEO, they had been around for 17 years and never developed a mission statement. So as a marketer, I was leading our executive leadership through a mission statement framework and helped them develop their first mission statement. In the first round, when I asked the CEO, what's the mission of the organization? He said, it's to make as much revenue as possible. And then when I asked, well, this mission statement should inspire our employees, he then responded with, it's to make as much revenue as possible so people can keep their jobs. That doesn't inspire. That doesn't help. Sorry. And I get emotional about it because I know that so many people are in jobs like that, where it's literally just a daily grind to screw over the customer, and that's their life. So if you don't actually have a vision and a mission that is hell bent on helping people, and whatever that looks like, then the rest of this falls apart. Like, it doesn't matter if sales and marketing are aligned, because you're essentially screwing the customer and you're never going to actually build a brand. You're never going to actually build a successful business. And if you look at the businesses that are not just microwaves, but are crock pots that have been around, that have actually found success, I mean, there are people that deeply understand their customer, that deeply empathize with their customer, and are super driven to ensure that the customer wins. And as a result of being so bent on helping their customers, they also make a ton of money, and nobody feels bad about it because everyone involved is better for it. So that's where you need to start. Like, you actually need to help your customers. You actually need to have a vision and a mission and a purpose that is driven on benefiting those around you. And once you've really gotten that established, it's way easier for sales and marketing to be aligned, because now marketing is actually super passionate about raising awareness for the problem that you are genuinely solving and bettering the lives of your customers. And then sales is super passionate about actually getting people into the product, into the service, because they know when they get through this, when they actually buy, their life will become better. And it's not just, can we be sleazy salespeople that get great commissions, but it's, can we be as salespeople a service to our customers? Can we be as marketers a service to our customers? So again, starting with vision and mission, that's how you actually start to really bring this alignment all together. And then really moving on back down to point 3, building a demand engine. If we want to look at a prime example, again, I actually work in a marketing agency. In some senses, people could define Refine Labs as a potential competitor, but I just think that they are an amazing case study of what it looks like when you build an effective demand engine bent on helping the customer, because they are everywhere. And they didn't exist in 2018. And just from a pure revenue perspective, their pricing is listed on their website. It's $31,000 a month to work with them, with a minimum ad spend of $50K. So if you're working with Refine Labs, you're spending at least $80K a month, but nobody's upset about it. They have built so much value and so much brand equity and helped so many people without asking for anything in return, that you're in some sense actually happy that you have the opportunity to spend $31K a month for the opportunity to work with them. That's insane. But it's also evidence of what it looks like when you build demand and build brand and build, again, a value-driven, missionally driven organization that is bent on helping the customer above all else. And then when it comes to marketing, this is where we're going to get really tactical. In my own role, when I started, I was measured on MQLs, and I didn't do it. Like I just didn't. I just ungated things, and I just really focused on posting a lot of content on LinkedIn, focused on what events can we host that will bring the right people in. I started running an ABM strategy, and prior to me starting, in the past 12 months, we had closed 5 deals that were marketing sourced. And in the past 10 months, we've closed 18 that have been marketing sourced. And the pipeline has gone up exponentially into the millions upon millions of dollars because we are driving brand and demand. So we've actually now changed my own metrics. I'm a sole marketer in a marketing agency. My measure of success is a discovery call. So our sales process starts with a connection meeting, then discovery, then recommendations. It's just a 3-call sales process. And discovery means that they've gotten through that qualification call to ensure that they're the right fit customer, that we actually can help them, that they are the right people that we would work with best. So if they've gotten to discovery, that means that marketing did its job in attracting the right people that are aligned from a mission standpoint, from a really execution standpoint. So again, if they've gotten to discovery, we're on the same page. And that's how really, from a very tactical perspective, you can really align the goals of marketing and sales. And interestingly enough, when you stop doing the MQL hamster wheel that is frequently referenced right now, I'm doing far more brand and awareness type plays that are having far greater impacts on getting discovery calls booked, because we're sharing more of our actual philosophy and our thought processes on marketing versus gating that content behind an email wall. So people just know us more. And as a result, we have more people come into our sales process. And then lastly, what I really love about the company I work for, it's called Mojo Media Labs. We don't just align marketing and sales incentives. We actually align everybody's incentives on profitability. So we have a base salary, and then across the entire organization, we are all bonused out of the profit before tax of the organization. And we have a weekly meeting called Open Book Management, where we look at the profit and loss statement of our organization to ensure that not just are we increasing top line revenue, but as we look at the expenses that come down, are we able to manage the costs all the way down to the bottom so that we are as profitable of a business as possible? And when we are profitable, we are all then rewarded. And I think that that has been the biggest shift overall in how you think about actually aligning incentives, because I'm not going to be bonused based on discovery calls, because a discovery call isn't actually revenue quite yet. I'm not going to be bonused off of MQLs. I'm bonused based on actual profit for the business. And when you align not just marketing and sales, but actually everybody around profit, you see increased retention, because people are, again, bent on helping the customer and making sure that they stick around to continue to work with us for years to come. So to really just kind of rattle off my thought process and a little bit more of a tactical perspective on how I think this could actually be executed, those are from top to bottom the 5 points. I think you can all tell I'm pretty passionate about mission and purpose and vision. So if we want to dive deeper into that specifically, I'd love to.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we get off of the 5 points real quick, I'd just like to, nuance a couple things on points 2 and 1. The exact metrics that you choose, whether they are, discovery, what they are is going to be very unique to the industry and the specific business and the product and the ICP. And there's a lot to consider there when you try to ask the question of what metrics really matter towards the strategic business outcomes that we're looking for. And so there's most good questions, the answer is some version of it depends. But to Alan's point exactly, they can't be vanity metrics. They can't be the kind of things that someone can use to justify their existence within an organization without actually moving the needle on the very things that matter most to the business. And so this requires a whole lot of conscious thought from the C-suite and those at the top, thinking about what those things are that actually matter. They should be listening to those around and below them as well in the org chart in order to develop that. The more buy-in and input you have from all parties in the company, the more buy-in you're going to have all the way through the process of executing it, right? There's a famous story that Jeff Weiner tells. If you've never listened to his trainings, it's amazing. Personal vision and mission statement translating into work. He's one of the former leaders of LinkedIn, and it's in LinkedIn Learning. It's called On Leadership. It's outstanding. It will change the way you think for sure. But he tells this story of a former Microsoft CEO who went up on the stage for the company-wide, keynote and says, "Hey, we're going to go global this year." And then that was the last thing he said about it. He comes around for the, first quarter review and says, "Well, how's it going with, going global?" So he brings this thing out of the back room without anybody even knowing what he's talking about. And then 3 months later expects it to have been executed when he said nothing about it in between. Right? So having a dream is not the same thing as having a vision. And the more buy-in and engagement and collaboration you have on that vision as a leader, the better the execution is going to be, the better the satisfaction and the personal fulfillment of everybody involved is going to be, right? The other thing I was just going to say, another kind of it depends nuance is, this profit sharing idea for the way to align comp. There are a couple of ways I think you could look at it. Refine Labs doesn't do bonuses of any kind. They basically pay the maximum OTE equivalent to everybody in the company. And you know what it is going in, and there's no striving for anything other than excellence because you're not worried about your paycheck. You know what it is, and you know it's great. And you're not just doing your best, but you're not even necessarily thinking about, well, I wonder what my paycheck's going to be. And so it creates a stability and it eliminates that entire dynamic. And I would say within this philosophy, there's diversity allowed for sure. The principle is that there's an alignment that gets everybody thinking about and working on and motivated by the same things. That's the principle at the strategic level. When you start talking about exactly how to do that, I think there's a lot of room for discussion and a whole lot of it depends going on. So those are the only two nuances that I had, Mason, on what you said. Appreciate your overview response. Dig in a little bit more for me on point 5 and the mission, vision, values, culture piece.
Yeah. So, I think we've all seen mission statements from large corporate organizations, and they're the fluffiest, most flowery bullcrap that you've ever heard. And they don't actually communicate anything. So that's why I harp so much on this idea of there needs to be a specific problem that you are looking to solve for your customers. And that's where you build a mission and a vision around. So it's very practical. It's, we are, trying to help 100 B2B organizations execute a sustainable ABM strategy, because otherwise they're not going to reach their best customers. They're not going to be able to help the most of their customer base the most effectively, whatever that looks like. And when you actually then have a more practical mission statement, as opposed to something to the extent of like, our goal as a marketing agency is to enrich lives, like, I don't actually communicate a whole lot. Whereas when it's highly practical, you can then actually set up things like key characteristics, critical actions. And if you want a prime example of what this looks like, I love the mission statement framework that's presented by Donald Miller. It's a part of a Business Made Simple University curriculum. But if you just go look at their careers page, they actually have their mission statement, their key characteristics, their critical values, their critical actions, their story pitch, and their theme. And when you look at their careers page, it clearly outlines like, we are these kinds of people. And it says 3 things about them. Like, we are results oriented, we are missionally driven, we are good listeners, like things like that, where from a vision and a mission standpoint, here's the kind of person I need to be in order to work well with this organization. And it also is a reminder to you, it's a twofold thing. It's who are you so that you work well with this organization, but also who are you always trying to become more of? And again, when you have a team that's striving to become essentially 3 characteristics, there's naturally going to be alignment there. The next piece of it is just 3 critical actions that anyone in the organization can do every single day. So for example, that could be, or maybe not every single day, but on a weekly basis, like we talk to our customers. Like that's a critical action that everyone in the organization can actually do that would bring further alignment. So what are the 3 things that any organization can do? And then essentially, I think we've all heard people try to describe their business and they're like, yeah, we've been in business since 1975. And yeah, it's my father's old business. I inherited the business, and it's just boring. Like you just turn off because you don't care. Like nobody cares how long you've been in business. They only care if you can help them. So instead, you actually then give your employees the words that they use to describe your business. And then they're bought in. And by them actually having the words and it being imprinted on them, they're actually more passionate, more involved, more invested, because you've given them a story and a vision to live into. And from there, you then have a foundational theme. And I'm also so passionate about this that I don't think it stops at business. Like I have a family mission statement and family critical value or core values and critical actions. My wife loves it because we want to be hospitable. So like one of our critical actions is that we're tidy, like we keep our house clean, which for me was more of a critical action for me than her. But all that to say, like it brings alignment between the two of us. And really when you have something laid out in this way, where it's not just this fluffy idea of a mission, but it's how do I live this out? Like, how do I live into this? It then actually, again, fosters alignment and actually drives the business forward. That's what I got.
I think it's good stuff. Let's turn it over to everybody. Let's have an open discussion here. What do you guys think about what we talked about? We've talked about a lot of stuff. We've been at 30,000 feet a good bit. We can go down some narrow paths or just anything that's on you guys' mind about what Mason and I have shared.
Happy to respond. Thanks for the insight, guys. I think everything you said is pretty bang on. It's common sense, but quite often a lot of people don't execute on common sense. So sometimes we need pointing out the most basic things and go through and execute on them. As a business, do we do all of the 5 points? We do a few of them, not all of them. Can we be better in areas? Absolutely. I think Mason will be really pleased to know that as a company, we have a combined mission and vision as a company, but we also have visions and missions for each of our products, and we've got 3 products. So we've done a lot of work there. Whether they actually subscribe or ascribe to what you said in terms of meaning something, we hope so. So that's just my general feedback is, thanks for pointing out the really key things that we should be focused on.
Thanks for your response, Al. I'm glad to have you with us for sure. Other thoughts?
Hey guys, hey Mason, hey Rob. So thanks for putting this together. Super insightful to hear your guys' journeys and how you guys are trying to go about achieving this. I don't know how familiar everyone is with me, but I've kind of been harping on this for some time. And what you basically described is very similar to the model I've created called the buyer-centric revenue model. And I think the obvious reason being that marketing and sales today is so anti-buyer. And so that sets up marketing and sales for an uphill battle and struggle. And sort of like we're in the straitjacket where marketing is doing things it should be doing and can't do the things they should be doing, and sales is the same thing. And so given sort of the way that marketing and sales is being structured today in B2B, you've got a misalignment between the two, whether that's in your goals and your metrics or in your compensation. And so, to kind of help people understand like why we're in this situation, how we got there, what are the things you need to change and how to get from A to B. I kind of harp on 4 things I think people who are not, should think on that might be interesting and tie into what we're trying to do here. The first thing is that I think that prospecting as a marketing strategy or sales development, whose job it is to do prospecting, is no longer viable today in marketing, and that demand generation can and should fully replace sales development. And it's because of sales development and because of prospecting that you have the M12 hamster wheel and the so-called lead gen model, and the natural misalignment between marketing and sales, or marketing produces junk and then sales gets caught holding back. And so if you want website demo requests, if you want marketing and sales to have similar metrics like revenue, cost per opportunity, conversion rate, sales cycle, CAC payback, all that good stuff, then you're going to have to get rid of prospecting and sales development, because otherwise you'll be stuck on the MQL. Because if your metrics were metrics I just outlined, it would quickly expose how awful prospecting and sales development is relative to demand gen. The second thing that I would encourage people to think on is the sales assembly line. So basically buyer handoffs amongst an assembly line of stunted sellers. So you'll have an AE, a CSM, and maybe someone else and whatnot. And that came about back in the day, as prospecting did back in the day, in the pre-internet era, where salespeople, because they weren't getting leads from marketing, because marketing had a hard time connecting buyers with sellers, they had the salespeople go out and do prospecting. And because prospecting was so laborious, salespeople couldn't do their actual job, so they split up the sales role into one person would do prospecting and the initial sale, another seller would do the expansion renewal. Predictable revenue comes along in the late 90s, early 2000s, says it doesn't make sense for salespeople to do prospecting part-time, and the initial sale, let's just take prospecting fully off sales' plate, but they kept the sales assembly line. That sales assembly line exists today. And I think that hurts sellers a lot, that it stunts their efficacy and their growth. It hurts buyers, obviously. The whole idea of the salesperson building relationships, building a book of business, all that type of stuff is gone. You just have, these sellers who, and then let me talk about the other two things, but it'll tie in. The last two things I would have people encouraged to consider is quota and commission. So we talk about, incentives and metrics and stuff like that. Sellers have quotas, marketers have goals, and the company as a whole has goals. What's the difference between a quota and a goal? A quota is a bad type of sales goal. It's a bad type of goal. It's a short-term production amount in a short amount of time. And so a seller has to produce X amount of revenue in a short amount of time, typically monthly. And by the way, basically half of their salary is withheld pending that quota attainment, pending that revenue attainment, pending the buyer's decision to buy, which is size outside the seller's control. So we talked about a bonus before. We talked about, or just having a bonus based on profit or full salary. A commission is not a bonus. It's not icing on the cake. It's half the cake. And it's designed to pressure the seller, to pressure the buyer, which is lose-lose. Plus it's variable payroll, plus all the gimmicks and gotchas and the complicated gimmick, whatever. It's awful for everyone. But the whole idea is you have to screw over the seller basically to pressure the buyer. If you're on 100% commission, the seller works 100% for free until the buyer pays the seller. If it's 50% commission, which is the standard today in B2B, the seller works 50% for free until the buyer pays. And so because of quoted commission, that creates desperate sellers and pushy sellers, and then it turns off buyers, and then the sales system today is very broken. Why does this matter for marketers? That pressure from sellers flows down to marketers. If a seller is struggling with their quotas and commission, that's going to make it very difficult for marketers to be able to do the right thing, because their sellers are pushing for the marketers to do the wrong thing. Oh, we're desperate, give us junk, just give us whatever, and so it's going to create that sort of, especially if marketing is already doing the wrong things like prospecting and sales development and MQLs, that's not going to help the seller. And that's why we see across the board, particularly in sales development, but also in sales, but even to some extent marketing, high turnover, low tenure, low performance, low productivity, low job satisfaction. Why a lot of marketers either flee to the agency world or flee to B2C, and why sellers, still suffer this bad reputation, still suffer, all the things we just talked about in sales. So, I challenge the predictive revenue model, because I think the predictive revenue model calcifies and preserves prospecting the sales assembly line. And then I also challenge quota and commission. And I think if we don't change these things, then we will still be in the straitjacket. These things that we're trying to struggle with will continue to happen. It won't be until the VCs and the PE firms buy into this, as they have bought into it, are still running the predictive revenue model playbook, and prospecting is still a core marketing strategy, and therefore MQLs and lead gen and intent data, and all that kind of crap still goes on today. So otherwise the CEO won't buy in. Like even if you have the CMO and even if you have the CRO who are trying to do this, it could happen. It'll just be a really big uphill battle to the CEO and the owners, whatever the owners of the company and PE firm or the VC.
Thanks, Nelson. I'm really glad you brought that up, because there's a really critical component to kind of the way we have to look at this. And that is, Alan is a COO founder. Everyone else here is not in the C-suite. So how do you make a tangible difference? How do you move the needle a little if you're in or consulting with someone who is in a position of subordination within the organization? And I would say one of the first things you can do is get the people who are your equals in different departments around the table together, having a conversation like this, and just get on the same page. Listen to them, ask them, probing questions about what their pain points are, their struggles. What are you going through? How could we do a better job of supporting you from our perspective? What could we do to contribute to your success and our customer success? And have that conversation at lunch. Have it around the, water cooler. Heaven forbid, have a friendship outside of work with somebody that you work with. There are lots of ways to go about it, but I think oftentimes it feels like pushing the rock up the hill with the rain beating down on you, and it's getting muddy and it's all going to heck in a handbasket, and you're that's how it feels. But you have to take small, tangible, and I would argue relational steps, because and this is a key thing. We want to have some tangible takeaways every single time we get together, but find somebody who works on the opposite side. And I would argue also, and Melanie, feel free to chime in here too, customer service has an important role to play in any business, whether that's a separate department or whether it's embedded within sales. And that's a key person, because they are right at the pain points of the customer and probably dealing with some upset customers for anyone in sales and marketing to build a relationship with. And not to mention the fact that the customer service people probably could use a friend, because that can be a very not pleasant job at times. Now, Alan, you had a raised hand, so love for you to share whatever you got, man.
Yeah, thank you, Nelson. I think that was a very interesting point, and actually showing quite a bit of thought leadership around this particular area. I think it's quite nuanced, obviously. I think every organization is different. I think I've not come from a sales and marketing background, so it's the last 6 years having started the business has been quite an eye-opener and a learning curve, as I'm sure you can imagine. And we think a lot about how we motivate, how we bonus. And I've come from a background where I've been in leadership roles in other teams, and we looked a lot around bonus. And what I really liked about something we did in the past was we did bonuses on a quartile sort of basis. So we had an individual bonus, we had a team, we had a company, and then there was almost like another quartile where we could sort of bonus people based on anything else. And it could be something out of the left field. It could be generating new ideas or whatever, something that's less focused on the specific business discipline. One of the surprising things when I sort of come into being in a business owner leadership role was looking at how salespeople like to be motivated, and particularly in the UK. And I'm starting to learn. I'm over here in Montreal, so on the same continent as you guys at the moment, is learning differences between Europe and the Americas. But a lot of European salespeople, I was quite surprised, like to be on a lower base salary because they enjoy the motivation of sort of really trying to attain and reach a quota. I've been trying to get my head around quotas and whether this is the right way to go, because my approach and our approach has been about having more of a unified process where it's a team effort, because we see sales and marketing, to a lot of the points that have been made, is very unified. It comes under growth in our view. So we're not at a stage where we can employ a C-suite person to look after that department, but we would put in place a chief revenue officer when we've got investment and more money. But overseeing both of these functions, so sales and marketing, yes, they're quite distinct, but even in my history, and this comes back to the quartile bonuses and a lot of what Mason was saying earlier about the unification across the business, is quite often there was all these departments are working in silo quite often in a lot of big organizations. You've got sales, you've got product, you've got marketing, you've got operations. Quite often marketing can do their bit, sales will be pissed off with something, then you'd actually manage to sell something, and then operations would go, well, you've overpromised. Actually, that's not what we do. So now you've caused fucking pressure here as well. So having that clarity right throughout the organization and everybody being bonus similarly, I think is really important, but also individually. So everybody understands what my contribution is individually, but how it then wraps up into the team and into the company. And I really feel that's important. There should be more of that in terms of how bonuses are recognized. I think there's a lot to be built on in terms of what you've said. It's really, there is nuance. And for us as a small company, it would be really difficult to pay more without the success. So we'd need to split on like almost what I'm seeing at the moment is quite, we're looking for an AE actually in the USA at the moment. And the guidance I'm getting is you pay between 50 and 70K, but the on-target earnings would be sort of double that. Or we have an approach of just uncapping commission, because I don't give a shit if somebody's selling. You can sell as much as you want and enjoy that. Anyway, I'll pause that because I've spoken quite a bit.
I've got a couple thoughts.
And I want you to go, Mason, but I just want to say, if you haven't followed Nelson on LinkedIn and jumped into the depth of his content, and this is for any of you, but especially with what you just shared, Alan, I mean, he is a genuine thought leader in this space and is stirring up a lot of mud. You know, the title of his book is enough to kind of get things on fire, The Death of the SDR. And I think there's a lot of weight and thoughtfulness behind that book title that I know I've really been challenged by and benefited from. So I would really encourage anybody to follow Nelson and dig deeper into his philosophy, because it's really, really good stuff. And Nelson, thanks for sharing so much of your ideas with us here. And thanks for being with us. And thanks for your perspective as well, Alan. Go ahead, Mason.
I mean, just a couple thoughts around just the compensation, because I've been, again, full commission. I've also been sitting as a marketing director where like we completely did a digital transformation of their marketing, and their sales team started to actually get more sales based on inbound leads that were quality. And I got 0 from that. And it was 100% from the things, I mean, I was a solo marketer. So like, what changed? We added a request a demo button to the website, and suddenly they had inbound leads. It was crazy. So like, I personally, as a marketer, love where I am right now, that I get bonused based on overall business performance. And what that actually also then does is for our salespeople is it helps them think through, is this going to be a long-term customer? Because if we end up finding that some of these customers are not the right fit, they get disqualified earlier in the process, because we recognize from a long-term perspective, and we're actually bonused. It's a quarterly cumulative payout, but it's based on, at the end of the year, it's annual profit. So they're not short-term. We'd rather take a smaller bonus this quarter so that we can have a way bigger bonus next quarter. And again, it's looking at it from a holistic perspective on from an annual side. And then the last general thought on this front, you know, oh goodness, it's escaping me at the moment, but we can leave it there. You know, I really do think that, oh, this was the last piece. I think the other kind of underlying issue is a lack of financial overall literacy, because like the way that I'm framing this concept of getting a bonus is I look at it as gravy on top of my income. So I live my life on my base salary, and then any bonus is just that, it's a bonus. Whereas when we look at the way that salespeople are compensated, like so much of their compensation is tied up in this idea of you have to make enough money so that you can then get the actual amount that you should be paid. And that's why I love the idea of base salary and then slight bonuses based on overall business performance, because then, hey, I can chunk extra money at my mortgage. I can take my wife on a great vacation. And it's based around an actual bonus, as opposed to my compensation is directly tied with, am I able to sell enough this quarter? That is completely dictated on outside forces. Give a livable wage and then bonus based on performance.
Yeah, and Nelson's way of putting it is bonus is the icing on the cake, but commission is half the cake.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a really cogent way of saying it, and really helpful.
just add to that. I'm sorry, Daniel. Just a quick little addendum to that, and then Daniel and Mikhail. I recommend that you pay sellers their full salary plus a bonus, and the bonus, whether it's company profit, team, individual base, whatever, however you component, it is up to you. But pay them fully upfront, transparently. In the book, I dedicated a significant amount of time to explaining the arguments for commission, and then exposing why they're untrue. And harmful, and then these example companies that have gone rid of commission, both in B2B and B2C, and all the benefits that they have seen all around for buyers, for sellers, and the companies themselves.
So Nelson, when we have you back and you're our primary guest in a few weeks, we're gonna just ask you to unpack that more for us, and we'll go into more depth with that. Mikhail, you've been very patient waiting to speak. I would really like to hear what you have to say.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks for doing this. And I just wanted to bring in one aspect of all of this that I think that it's important for all of it, for like how organizations work towards customers, towards employees, and how it affects actually everything. And it's been the major leading factor for me, how I came to all these thoughts and changes, and it's ethics. And it's basically how companies right now pushing their salespeople and marketing people doing unethical things, and while at the same time their mission statement or vision statement could be, like they're saints, but at the same time, the practices that use them totally unethical, and no one is talking about it, and it always looks like it's normal, like, hey, it's how it's supposed to be, So it's this like this vision, mission, whatever, all these fancy words, they have nothing in common with the reality. And it's when even companies then have internally problems with ethics, like where these commissions that totally push people to do unethical things, it's just a trap for many people to act differently. So I think that as we are starting at this very broad discussion of everything, I think that ethics is a very good consideration on any level. Like, hey, how do we work with employees? And if we apply an ethical approach, it's a good motivation for employees to apply ethical approach with customers, which brings good results in long term. While everybody is focused on short term, and they just forced to use unethical tactics, So I think that just wanted to add this.
No, I appreciate it a lot, Mikhail. A couple of things that I'm prompted to do at this juncture, because we're going to finish up here, is I want to share some books that have been impactful to me. One that I just came across is called The Ethical Algorithm, and it's very, very academic, but it's thinking about the way that designed technology impacts society. And so I think it connects very much to marketing. If you click on my LinkedIn profile, I have two things kind of pinned at the top. One is this event, and the other is kind of a personal, philosophy of marketing. And I think marketing leads society in some ways, and it mirrors but then leads society. And it's a really interesting dynamic. And if you've not read Marshall McLuhan, and Neil Postman on that topic. They were 20th century philosophers, and they kind of predicted the impact of television on society. And then, of course, we're a few iterations down the road now. But the philosophy is very strong there. And then the other one that I was just going to recommend is a book called Conscious Business. And I've actually got it here on the shelf, by Fred Kaufman. It's incredible. It is an excellent resource. It's a just really, really good read and resource for the kind of conversations that we're having. And then the On Leadership LinkedIn Learning by Jeff Weiner is really, really fantastic as well. And if you're a LinkedIn subscriber, you can already jump in and partake of that. And no matter where you are in your org chart or your career at your business, you will find that there are people who have been there before and have wrestled with the same questions that you are wrestling with, and probably have at least some wisdom, if not some empathy for you. I tell you this, I'm really grateful for you guys that showed up. It'll be a few days before we put the content up. I'm gonna, maybe take a few segments of things to advance some specific ideas, but I really appreciate everybody's time and investment in the middle of the day, in the middle of the week, of the first week of the year. And we will do this again a week from today. And thanks especially to Mason for being our featured guest today. And appreciate you guys.